We're live, everyone. Hello, I'm Elisha Krause, and this is our latest episode of The Conversation. And with me is the wonderful Andrew Klavan. Can we call you a novelist?
Yes, absolutely.
Novelist Andrew Klavan. That's a behind-the-scenes joke.
We'll explain in a moment.
And he'll be taking all of your questions for an entire hour, starting now. Please remember that our conversation is streaming for everyone to watch, but only subscribers to the Daily Wire get to ask the questions. How do you become a subscriber, you may ask? Well, go over to dailywire.com and click the link to become a subscriber, or you can also click the link in our video description if you want to ask a question there after you are a Daily Wire subscriber.
Excellent.
So we made the novelist joke because we were talking novelists earlier.
Yes.
And my non-college educated illiterate mind is like, well, to qualify as a novelist, do you have to write a novel or does it need to be multiple?
Just depends how good it is, I think. If you write one really great novel, you're a novelist.
You've written a couple really great ones.
I've written a lot of great ones.
And you've written 2 seasons now of Another Kingdom.
Another Kingdom, yep. I've just started planning the third, but the second one is just being released.
Okay, so that leads me to a follow-up question.
Yes.
I'm listening to season 1. Sorry, I wasn't an OG fan. But it's now here at Daily Wire. Yeah. The beautiful illustrations.
Yes, so nice.
If you are a subscriber, then you have access to this and you know. And it's really cool to see. I love the power of audio and the narrative. Like, I loved listening to, like, Chronicles of Narnia on tape when I was a kid, right? Because then you can just envision it and imagine it in a different way. And you and Michael do such a good job with the series. But I did wonder, even as I was listening to season 1, was he already working on season 2? And then, you know, I'm sure there are people listening and watching season 2 that are wondering, oh, is he working on season 3?
Well, I started out with a vision of the whole thing. So I had the whole thing in my head to begin with. And now it's the details. It's working out the plot and working out where exactly everything is going to go and when it's going to happen, the timing, you know, what the action sequences are like. But I kind of know what the story is about. So
how often do you get, like, somewhere in the story and you're going, never mind, I don't like that?
Well, that doesn't happen because I outline so much. I work on outlines so hard. Mm-hmm. It's the one, I was just talking to Shapiro about it. It's the one thing about my job that I don't really like that much because it's kind of boring. But that's when you say, like, that's not going to work. That's going to be dull. I'm taking that out. I'm cutting that. I can write that to that. And then when you're writing, everything just flows because you've done all the prep.
I have to say, I'm always fascinated the more I get to know you, how there is the dedication to it. There's the creativity of your craft, but then there's the detail of your craft, and that's a perfect example of that.
People do not realize how much time you spend shifting commas around. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like it's really detailed work, and I love doing it. I love the actual writing of it, but it's really detailed, complicated work because it's, you know, one of my other obsessions, I love to do little puzzles, like cryptic crossword puzzles, and it's almost the same thing. You know, it's just like fitting things so they go right where they're supposed to go. The only thing about novel writing is there's this emotional element because you're fitting them right where they're going to deliver the greatest punch, where they're going to give people the greatest insight into characters, the greatest feeling of being there, and all that. And it's a great profession.
Do you also love doing backstage? Because we're doing that tomorrow.
I love backstage because of the cigars.
And everybody should be, not because I'm there, not because there's whiskey. I mean, cigars is a good, honest answer. Everyone should know that backstage is tomorrow night. And much like The Conversation, anyone can watch, but only subscribers can ask the questions there too. And I'll be fielding those questions to you and Ben and Jeremy, the God King. And Michael, is he there too?
We'll let him
I guess he kind of has to be there. First question comes from Joel. He says, is the Democrat Party beyond recovery due to its embrace of socialism and raucous behavior? Should we throw the Dems in the waste bin of history with the Whig Party, or remotely similar to those presented in the Bible? This is a really long question, dude. Should this partly inform American immigration policy, like religion, support values, remotely similar to those presented in the Bible? And should this partly inform American immigration policy? There were like 20 questions. There
were a lot of questions in there, but let's stick with the one about the Democrat Party because that's an easy. The thing is, the Democrat Party right this minute is outside of it's not outside of the American mainstream. It is outside of the American story. It is no longer interested in continuing the American story. It is interested in ending it. There's simply no question about this. There's no question they're starting to talk about packing the Supreme Court, ending the Senate, ending the Electoral College, all of it based on the idea that they do not like the fact that the middle of the country, whom they despise, can govern themselves. They just don't like it. They don't like those people. They despise them. They don't understand why LA and New York and Washington don't get to tell everybody what to do. And they don't want that local federal government that is very much a part of the American story, built to keep America free. The only thing is that history is weird. It is entirely possible that 50 years from now, it'll be the Republicans, party that represents that, and the Democrats that represent some kind of sanity. Things do change. The party as it stands now is no longer an American party. And when I say that, by the way, I don't mean the average Democrat voter. I know the average Democrat voter is voting the way his parents voted, or just trying to do what's nice and not really paying attention. But I'm talking about the people who are not only rioting in the streets of Portland and New York, but the politicians who are encouraging them, who are not saying, dial it down, bring it back. This is no way to behave. So I think right at this moment, the Democrats are lost in a dark wood, but that doesn't mean they won't come back.
All right. So there's some hope for them.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't abolish them altogether, just the bad guys.
Yeah, well, they just have to come to their senses. I'm really hoping I don't think this is going to happen, but I'm hoping they just get smushed in the midterm so that old canny political actors like Chuck Schumer will say, that didn't work. That resistance thing wasn't working. Maybe we should go in a different direction, because that would be a very fast cure. I think.
It is interesting to see this divide, too, within the Democratic Party right now. Which way are they going to go? Yep. Especially when it comes beyond the midterms into the presidential election. Who are they going to put up?
Because whether you like him or not, Trump has unified the Republican Party because of the success of his policies and the success of his politics, whereas the Democrat Party is really, depending on what happens in the midterms, it may be two parties at each other's throats.
All right. Next, we go to Arun, who says, "Hi, Andrew. Do you think that any non-Abrahamic..." Abrahamic. See? I told you earlier in the green room.
Sorry, you looked like you were asking me.
I always biff a word, and it's usually with Shapiro, but now we got it with Klavan too. Abrahamic religions support values remotely similar to those presented in the Bible. Should this partly inform American immigration policy?
Of course they do. Of course, some religions support. There are basic norms of behavior that I think a lot of religions support. What I don't think any other religion has is the intent, especially once you get to Christianity, is the intense personal relationship with God. I can't think of another God who says, "You're now my friend. You were my servant. Now you're my friend." That is an amazing thing. I think that the idea that man is created in God's image, that the distance between us is mitigated by the fact that we are related somehow, I think that those things are really important. So much of what's important in the Abrahamic religions is that intimacy. And I don't really think that intimacy exists everywhere. But, I don't know about every religion, and I don't know a lot of religions can only be seen from the inside. What I would say is, looking at the history of the West, there is nothing else like the Constitution anywhere else. There is now because they imitated it, but there's nothing else like the treatment of women anywhere else. There is now because they imitated it. All of those things grow out of what used to be called Christendom. It used to be called Christendom. It didn't come anywhere else. Even scientific thought didn't come anywhere else. So I have to think there's something truly unique about this way of looking at God and this concept of the relationship between God and man.
All right. Ashton says, as an Anglo-Catholic and someone deeply influenced by St. Thomas and thus Aristotle, how can I promulgate Aristotelian virtue ethics in a world dominated by materialism?
Well, it's interesting when you say promulgate, suggesting that you want to spread them. I think, first of all, you have to inhabit them and embody them. I mean, I think that's the thing. And Aristotle tells you how to do it, and so does Jesus, for that matter. I mean, Aristotle says that if you want to become virtuous, you have to practice the virtues. You have to actually figure out, virtues are in keeping with reason, you have to figure out what the virtue is. And in Aristotle, there's always some kind of moderation between two extremes of something. And then you have to live it out. And, that's so much harder than you think it is. And that's why I worried a little bit about the question. Before you take the speck out of your neighbor's eye, you got to take that big plank out of your eye. And that's a lifetime achievement. It's not, I hear a lot of Christians say, like, well, now the plank is out of my eye and come after your...
No, every day.
No. Yeah, that's not the way it works. So I think that it is really, really easy to sit in a room and think about virtue. And it's really easy to go to a party or sit in your dorm at night and talk about virtue. It's hard in the moment to do the virtuous thing, especially when something's at stake, especially when, that job you want is there and somebody else is in your way, or when, the money is on the table and you can take it, but you got to sell a little bit of your soul. So it's in those moments when you're tested, but it's every single day and every moment that you are allowed, given the opportunity and the privilege to practice virtue. And that may just be saying thank you to your wife when she does something for you, it just...
Hint, hint.
No, really, it is an every moment thing. And I always say this, but when people tell me how are they supposed to sell what they think is the proper lifestyle, and my answer to that is always live it with joy. If you are good but miserable, that's not a big advertisement for virtue. If you are virtuous and joyful, and that's what Aristotle was talking about. He's always talking about happiness. Happiness was the chief good because it didn't lead to any other good. Nobody wants to be happy because of something. You want to be happy because you want to be happy, right? So if you act well in joy, I think you will be an advertisement for virtue.
I just got to say, we're 10 minutes in, and I feel like I'm at church. We got Pastor Andrew Klavan today, preaching. Let's keep it.
Just put your hand on the screen, and I will heal you.
Send in your donations. Paul says, hi, fellow millennial. I love hearing from you and the Daily Wire crew about domestic policy. Do you have any suggestions of who to listen to or read to get some great info on foreign policy?
Yes, there is this guy. It used to be Krauthammer, used to be the big foreign policy guy, but there is this guy now, and his name always escapes me, and it escaped me now. But every Tuesday, he was in there today in the Wall Street Journal. He does the international page, and he is the best foreign policy writer who is available daily that I can think of. My biggest objection to most foreign policy writers is they tell you what's going to happen. So if you do this, this is going to happen, or the big ones are like there's a culture clash coming, or it's the end of history, or any of that stuff. None of that stuff I believe, because I think you're dealing with completely unpredictable systems, namely billions of human beings, right? But this guy, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name. He's got 3 names, and I always forget it. But anyway, he's in the Wall Street Journal every Tuesday, and he just writes about what the situation is. So, for instance, we're dealing with this Jamal Khashoggi thing. The journalist, the WAPO journalist, who was apparently murdered in Turkey in the Saudi consulate, and he just sets up. He says, "This is what the situation is. This is who the players are. This is why they're doing that." And then he might make a recommendation, but he's not giving you this kind of seer-like vision of what's going to happen next. I'm very, very skeptical of that. I'm very, very happy to get this accurate, non-biased descriptions of what the field of play is, and it's hard to come by.
I feel like that's also hard to come by in politics. That's why I love our Daily Wire team.
That's right.
Because you get these people that are like, well, here's what's going to happen, and then we've seen time and time again that doesn't always happen.
The 2 things you need to know are what's the state of play, who are the players, and what's going on, and the other thing is what's a vague idea of what you want. Because if you don't know what you want, you don't know whether the thing is good or bad. And those things don't involve predicting the future. And it's easy. It's fun to predict the future, but we really don't know what's going to happen 10 minutes from now.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah. Jonathan says, do you think one reason that many highly educated people on the left may be, in part, because they focus so much of their own field that they do not take time to consider their political views?
Boy, that's a really good question. My suspicion is that we're dealing with a powerful force that Americans don't like to talk about, which is class. When you become, we still have a fluid class system in America. It's not as fluid as it used to be, but you can still, in America, and I lived in England for a long time where it's not the same, but in America, if your father's a waiter and you get into Yale, you're in the upper classes. Nobody cares that your father was a waiter. They're kind of impressed that you did that, So, but I really do believe that classes have coded systems of values. So in order to be in that class, in order to be one of us, as Joseph Conrad would have said, you're one of us, you believe certain things. And there has been a very, very intensive effort, especially in the academy, to sell the concept that the cool kids believe this, the upper class people believe that. And once you have that system in place, it's very hard for somebody who wants to make it up. And, we all want to rise, we all want to do better for ourselves, and that's great. But it's very hard for people to abandon that and say, just like we were talking about virtue before, in that moment when the Queen of England or whoever is the leader of your group says to you, I will invite you to dinner, and then you realize you have to say, well, I'm opposed to abortion, and then never get invited to that dinner again, it just becomes very hard to proclaim the values that you want to have. And I've seen this again and again because most of the people I know are in that kind of upper echelon, and they just don't want to let go of the in that it gives you to believe in these things. You know, most of them are obviously, most educated people tend to have more money. That tends to make you a little bit less aware of the damaging economic consequences of social spending. So, because it's not going to affect you, you can afford the taxes, you don't care, you know, so you think like, well, I can afford the taxes. But it doesn't dawn on you to think that maybe this is going to have an adverse effect on the rest of the country, you know?
Because you're out of touch with them.
Because you're out of touch with them.
Yep. Matthew says, Andrew, why do you take Friday off?
Well, I take Friday. That was how we originally set it up, and we haven't really thought to change it yet. I do, you know, this is only half of the job I do. I do still write full time, and so I need my Friday to write in, and it does make my life a little bit easier.
I mean, he's got to roll out another Kingdom
I
series.
know.
Come on, guys. Yeah. Sean says, what are your thoughts on those that open carry firearms in public? I'm
for it. I'm a complete Second Amendment purist. You know, I don't care if you have a bazooka on your leg, as long as you know how to use it and you're not a bad guy. You know, I think that I don't understand why, for instance, in LA, it's almost impossible to get a carry permit, and that's ridiculous. You know? Yeah. And I think that freedom, the right to bear arms, is the right to bear arms. You know, and we should have that right, and we should use it. And I don't think it increases violence. I think it actually keeps it down, because if everybody's strapped, nobody wants to start trouble, you know.
That's for sure. Margot says, is it possible for Drew to do Andy Millennial without losing it and breaking into laughter?
Yeah, it's so funny. Knowles and I were talking about this yesterday. We were sitting there saying we should do some more Andy Millennial. We always make a resolution that we're not going to crack up. Last time we were both really into it. We were going to get through it. I must have gotten 5 words into that, and Senya, Knowles' producer, just let fly. And once somebody laughs, everybody laughs. So we're working on it. We have our scientists are working around the clock, and we'll do it eventually.
We're trying.
Yeah,
we'll just tell Senya, just stop laughing.
Right.
Keep it down. Veronica says, I see how it may be good to give, say, a Hispanic B student a chance to go to Yale versus another Asian student that has a 4.8, for example. But what's wrong with giving someone an opportunity to be a solid B student at a top school?
Yeah, I'm completely against this. First of all, you cannot give privilege to one race without taking privilege away from another race. And who are you to say? Look, either judging people and reacting to people by their race is right or it's wrong. I think it's wrong. I think we're made in God's image. I think anytime you judge a person by the color of his skin, you're acting like a buffoon. I think you are actually sinning against the image of God. So I don't see how you can take a system that's so complex with so many billions of people and decide, oh, well, all the people who are colored like this need to be treated this way, and then that'll be more fair than that. Stop doing it. Treat the people as individuals. If the guy is 4.8, it really takes almost more than that to get into Yale, put him in Yale. If he doesn't belong there, you're doing him a disservice, because he's going to be in a place where he's going to fail. You know, you're putting him out in a place where he's going to be the least person there, instead of a bigger fish in a smaller pond, where he might really find what he's good at. And I just think, you know, we have bought into this where we even discuss it. The fact that we even discuss it, to me, is disgusting. You know, a person is a person. He walks in the door, she walks in the door, she's on, you know, like you're going to say, who is this person? How do I get to know him? Let the people who, do the entrance interviews at Yale and every place else work it that way. Stop looking at this little tiny layer of flesh that people have that somehow has become the doctrine. You know, it's what it is in trying to correct the racism that has been part of this country and every country, we've adopted it. You know, we've said, oh, we can fix it if we now balance it, you know, because it was against black people, so now we'll be nice to black people. Just get rid of it. That's the only thing you can do. And I know it's going to be unfair for a while, but it'll all work itself out in the end. And since it's the only thing we can do, it's the only thing we can do.
Carlos says, King of the Multiverse, Klavan, yes. Why is it that conservatives are so against weed and other psychedelics? Isn't a conservative view to let people do whatever the hell they want?
Oh, but that's 2 different questions. That's not a fair question. See,
he seems like a libertarian to me.
Yeah, well, you know, I actually am for people to do whatever they want, as long as they don't hurt anybody. That doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. I mean, conservatives usually have an idea of what the right thing to do is. The question is, at what point do you let people do the wrong thing? I tend to be fairly libertarian. I mean, I always tell people, I don't care what they do. I know certain things they do are going to make them unhappy, but the operative word is them. It's going to make them unhappy. Now, I gotta say, like, I drink alcohol and I like alcohol, although I don't like getting drunk, so I'm not an abuser of alcohol.
We also talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
And how alcohol really doesn't help when you're trying to lose weight.
When you're trying to lose weight, it really doesn't. But I've never taken any drug except when I was a kid in the 60s. I smoked a little bit of dope, but I never liked it, so I tried it, but I didn't really enjoy it. If that's what turns you on, fine. I gotta say, this LSD, there's now this new fad of microdosing LSD. And a lot of important people have done it, and a lot of people have recommended it to me. I'm really opposed to anything that blunts my immediate perception of the world. So I love being here. I love being on Earth, okay? That is an endearing but not always admirable trait. I mean, I really am a worldling, I really do like it here. I don't need something to show me like some distorted vision of that. I'm really into what's going on, It's like when I say I've heard people say, like, break this under your nose, it'll improve sex. And you think, how much better does sex get? It can't get that much better. I'm really having a good time. I don't need to break something under my nose, And I feel the same way about life. So listen, do what you're going to do. But I think that I have never met anybody who was wiser for taking LSD, though they all say so. I've never met anybody who's anything less than stupider for smoking a lot of dope. But you're on your own,
All righty. Laurel says, Andrew, how did your kids get to be so intelligent?
Very simple, very simple. My wife's family is really bright. It's really true. My wife's father was one of the smartest people I've ever met. I mean, he really was. And my son has his brain, it's his capacious brain. And of course, my wife is very smart, and I think that accounts for all of it.
So it's all her side.
It's all her side. Look at me. I mean,
I think you're pretty smart. I mean, you did just use the word capacious.
Capacious, yeah. I did, yeah. What does that mean?
Dictionary.com.
I just keep using them, hoping nobody questions me about them.
Duncan says, given that life is suffering, would it not make sense that abortion should be legal up until a fetus develops a fetal pain circuit?
Wait a minute. Given that life is suffering.
Yeah.
Life is suffering is the second great truth, okay? The first great truth is that life is good. And the way you know that is because you're still here suffering. So in other words, in order to get to the point of suffering, you have to have chosen to live. To be or not to be is actually the question. So that's I think, I know it's Buddhist doctrine, but I think the doctrine that life is suffering is a shallow doctrine because it's built on the second great truth instead of the truth under it, which is that life is good. I think that when you eradicate a fetus, let's put it that way. When you eradicate a fetus, you have eradicated a life that you know not of. You do not know whether it's a life that's going to cure cancer. You don't know whether it's a life that's going to sing songs, a life that's going to raise children. I mean, for the love of God, raising a child well is one of the great works of mankind, of womankind usually, but still, when you eradicate that person, you don't know. And the person you've eradicated had no voice, had no vote, had no way to say, no, wait, this life is good. My life is good. I want my life. So it just seems to me, I don't understand how you can justify it. I don't understand how you can justify it on the basis of the person you're eradicating. I can understand how people argue, oh, this will ruin my life. But I think there are other ways you can accommodate that and other ways you can fix that. But at least you can make that argument. You can't make the argument that I know that person's life is going to be no good or it's going to be suffering, so I can get rid of them. I could do the same to any person walking the street. Just walk up to them and say, your life doesn't look so good. Pow! I mean, it doesn't make any moral sense.
All right. Arun says, hi, Andrew. If we discovered intelligent extraterrestrial life tomorrow, how would this impact Jewish or Christian theology and your understanding of the Bible?
Oh, of course, it would depend on what they were, who they knew, what they knew. The one thing is that Jesus is a God made flesh. It doesn't seem to me impossible, in theology, that God might be made something else for another race of creatures that we know not of. I mean, I assume that the world is, that the universe is not completely contained in our imaginations. I have a really sneaking suspicion that if we see life on other planets, it won't be all that different from us. And I think that will set some of the random evolution theories spinning but won't really set theology spinning very much. In other words, if a spaceship landed and somebody got out and it looked just like us, except with a bigger head or something like that, that would really mean that evolution was not as random as you think, because the odds against that happening in a random way are almost nil, right? So that would mean that there was a system, an intelligent design to evolution, which we can't see because we're in the system, so we can't see whether it's random or not. And I think that life from other planets is more likely to upend evolutionary theory than it is to upend theology.
Sorry, when you talked about the space landing and we see something that looks like ourselves, I just kept thinking of Guardians of the Galaxy 2 when Kurt Russell gets off and tells Chris Pratt that he's his dad.
We're in good shape, I think.
Well, except in that movie, but in general, if it's Kurt Russell, we're all okay.
We're all okay. Exactly.
Veronica says, as far as dating standards, how much is too much when disagreeing on values and the lifestyle you and your potential significant other want?
Well, it's funny. Obviously, you can't answer that in any kind of detailed way, right? You can't say 14. You want to have a difference of 14. After you get to 15, the marriage is just not going to work. I mean, obviously, there is some deep connection between people that overrides political disagreements, that overrides even cultural disagreements, and you can have a long and happy marriage with a lot of things that you disagree with. More important is, how do you handle disagreements? Because there's some people who can't handle it at all. We see them running around the streets of Portland, in masks with clubs. Those people can't handle the idea that there are different ways of looking at the world. I've always been really comfortable with that idea. I think part of being a novelist is accepting that other people have an entirely different conscience, an entirely different way of looking at things. And so if you have that and you get along with somebody and you can live with the fact that, when you're living with somebody of the opposite sex, you're living with somebody who's really different. I mean, you're living with somebody who is really different. And if you're going to sit there and think like, how can why can't a woman be more like a man? Or why can't a man be more like a woman? You're going to live a long, angry life, in your marriage, And I think that that's true of politics and culture as well. Obviously, if you don't agree on anything, it might be a sign of the fact that you have deeper differences that are not going to meld as well as you like. But you should be two different people living as one flesh. That is kind of the joy of the whole thing. So what are there three kind of big things, though, that you think need to be unified before you can go forward? Well, first of all, one really important thing I really do believe is sexual morality. I mean, it's no good if one of you thinks he's in a faithful relationship and the other one doesn't. And people laugh when I say things like that, but it really is important. You want to know that sex means vaguely the same thing to each of you, even though it's going to be different for a man and a woman. You want to know that basically this is a way that you express your love for one another, and it's unique to this relationship in your life. So that's an important thing. Obviously, people fight a lot about money, and I personally don't understand married couples who keep separate bank accounts. To me, it's like you're a family now and all the money is in one pot, but I know people make that work. So I think that you should really talk about, these are the things I think you should talk about before you get married. I think you should talk about what sex is like and what you guys want from it, how you feel about money, and obviously a big one is children, because I think that I see a lot of people who got into a marriage to have children, and then one of them or the other doesn't want it. And that is the one where you get to be my age, and if you haven't had children and you wanted them, you've really lost something. It's like not doing the job you want to do. You can fix that, but you can't fix not having had children. I mean, having children is a big deal. So I think those are three big ones that you want to at least have common ground. I mean, if one person says, oh, I want 4 kids, and the other says, I want 3, you can live with that. But if one person says, I really don't want this, you better be sure in your heart that when you get to be 50, you're not going to be sad that you have no one to spend Christmas with. Or bitter towards the other person that kept that from you. Yeah. Alrighty. Ed says, hi, Andrew. Do you support the death penalty? If so, how do you square this with the fact that you think human life is sacrosanct as per your views on abortion? I can imagine a death penalty that I would support. I do not support the death penalty as it's currently practiced anywhere in the United States of America. Really? Yes, I do not think it is right to put a person in prison for a crime, leave him there 20 years. At any time, during any time he could be killed, but is not going to be killed. He takes 5 walks down the last mile, and at the last minute he can be pardoned. I think that that's cruel and unusual punishment, and I think at the end of 20 years, you're not killing the guy who did the crime as a totally different person at that point. I would support some kind of death penalty in which the one that I always picture, and I think this would be constitutional, I asked a lawyer once, it would be that there would be a special panel for each person who was sentenced to death. It had 360 days to prove that the guy didn't do it. That's what he has to prove. Not that the trial was wrong, but that he didn't do it. And they work for 360 days, and on day 361, they carry out the death sentence. Now, that doesn't seem to me to violate the sacredness of life, because the whole premise of the death penalty is that you have violated the sacredness of life. You have given up your right to this good thing, life. And so I wouldn't use it for many things, but there are certain things I would use it. I would use it for professional killers. I would use it for, killers with extreme circumstances. And then, if you had a death penalty like that, where you knew on day 361 you were going to die, after about 10 years, you could then see, did it save lives? One of the other problems I have is that the death penalty now is so erratic and so irrational that there's no way to tell if it saves lives.
Especially in states like California.
Yeah, there's no way to tell if it reduces crime or not. So, listen, I'm certainly not for the death penalty if it doesn't reduce crime, because what's the point, But I think that I could see a rational death penalty where I felt that I knew you were going to get a fair shake. We have DNA testing now. We can do all the things that you can do in a year. And then it was carried out. And then I think after a few years, we should study its effect on it. But I don't think it doesn't violate my sense of the sacredness of life, because I think that's the whole premise of the death penalty, that you have violated that sacred contract.
And there's a consequence for it.
Then there's a consequence. Yeah.
All right. Please remember that our conversation is live for everyone to watch. So we have people watching on Facebook and YouTube and on dailywire.com, where if you are not a subscriber, then you can't ask Andrew all of these amazing and pressing questions that you have. And you have like 28 minutes and 30 seconds left to ask those questions. So go over right now, become a subscriber at dailywire.com. You can do so over there, or click the link in our video description. And to ask questions, just sign up.
That's it.
All right. And be sure to tune in for next month's episode. Oh, I have to sit down with Michael Knowles again. But that's going to be on Tuesday, November 13th at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 2:30 p.m. Pacific time, featuring the great author himself, Michael Knowles.
Yeah, that's right. He's a revolutionary author. He discovered that words are not necessary.
He's been doing this college tour recently, so you should check out to see if Michael Knowles is coming to a college near you. Of course, you guys do those speeches through Young America's Foundation.
Yes.
And I love that one of the speech subjects literally is the students requested that he write or he deliver a speech on how do you write a blank book and sell 100? How to write a blank book and sell 100,000 copies? And I was like, easy. Get the president to tweet it.
I think both Shapiro and I want to know the answer to that question. It would make both our lives a lot easier.
Then you wouldn't have this job. You just write all the time.
That's right.
Joel says, as the saying goes, a way to a man's heart is through his stomach. What food does your wife make that falls under this axiom? And are there any foods that signal events?
I love the fact that my wife is a homemaker. After our kids grew up, after they didn't need full-time care, she also became a professional. She is a psychotherapist, but she has remained a committed homemaker. It means a great deal to me. First of all, I can't cook at all, but it's not the food. It's the fact that she makes it. I mean, she's a lovely cook. She makes really good, she's really good, what do they call it? Like home cooking. But I just like the fact that she has made a world for me that I can live in. I'm not really capable of that. Had I been left on my own, I always joke that I'd be living in a dumpster, but anywhere I lived would be a dumpster, because I really don't take very good care of myself, and I need somebody. I'm an artist. I'm living in my head a lot of the time. I need somebody to take care of me. So I think that, when they say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach, I don't think they're actually talking about the food. I think they're talking about the care that you get, which I think makes a tremendous difference in my life. And when I see modern marriages where that's not taking place, I don't judge it. Whatever makes you happy is good. But I just think I would have missed out on a tremendous joy in my life, which is that my wife has made a place for me to be. And I would not have had a place otherwise.
That's really sweet. Just pull that clip and give it to her for Valentine's Day. Brian says, hi, Alicia, and hi, Andrew. Hey, Brian. He lives in Philadelphia, and he's very disappointed that the Gosnell movie isn't playing anywhere near him. Do you know if it will be playing in any more theaters?
I do not know. I mean, they fought very hard. The producers fought very hard and very diligently to get it in as many as it got into. You can see by the fact that it has gotten almost no mainstream reviews. It's gotten a lot of reviews because now we have some media on the right. It's gotten no mainstream reviews. The LA Times went out of its way to attack it, but it didn't look from the review like the guy had actually seen it, you know? So I would probably doubt, if it hasn't opened by now in Philly, I would doubt that it would be there, but it will come out in all the other venues, DVDs and streaming and all that stuff, so you will get a chance to see it. If you can see it, it really is helpful if you go and see it in the theater. Every ticket that gets bought really helps the cause of not just the film, but of films like this. When people know that there's an audience there, you can sometimes convince the mainstream people to chime in and make some pictures like this. But basically, the amazing thing about the Gosnell story is the only thing that makes it a story about abortion, because he killed babies who were already born, so it wasn't actually killing them through abortion. What makes it about abortion is that the people who support abortion won't cover the story. That's what makes it about abortion. They didn't cover the trial, they didn't cover the story, they won't cover the movie. They won't let them give the movie any kind of publicity at all. And my question to them is, if abortion's not murder, how come you won't cover the story of this murderer who just happens to be an abortionist? And obviously, in their own minds, they know this is homicide, and they know that if they watch a movie about an abortionist who commits homicide, they're actually watching a movie about abortion. They're saying it, not us, because we just made a level crime story, a story of a killer. So it's really interesting to me that they can't, it's like they've got their hands over their eyes, and they're doing the same. They didn't cover the trial until Kirsten Powers basically wrote a column shaming them into it. They didn't cover the trial, and now they're not covering the movie. And that tells me something. That tells me that they're dealing with a great deal of shame and guilt.
Spencer says, whom would you consider to be the greatest writers in English language in terms of style? And were there any writers who particularly influenced you when you were crafting your own writing style?
Well, the greatest writer who ever lived is Shakespeare. And he's one of the few things in life that is as good as people say he is. I understand that now he's very difficult to understand, but he's worth understanding, because the fact that he writes so beautifully, he writes such, he invented the language almost, he invented the modern English language, and yet writes such stories of such action and adventure, to me is amazing. Also, Charles Dickens, I was just talking about this with my wife, in fact, that if you read the opening pages of Bleak House, it's probably some of the greatest prose in the English language. He was just a brilliant prose stylist, and because his stories are so much fun, people don't actually talk about how great he wrote. As for the effect on me, I'm a child of the American tough guy writers, Hemingway and Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett. And even though my style over time has become a little bit more complex than theirs, I do believe in I do believe in the American vernacular. I do believe in fast-moving, hard prose that gets you where you want to go. So, for instance, I was deeply affected by the storytelling of Shakespeare, and I was deeply affected by the storytelling of Wilkie Collins. But I didn't want to imitate it. I wanted to translate some of those things, some of those qualities that I loved, into American prose. So I have tried to write very action-packed stories that yet have insight into human life, but I've had to do it in the American vernacular, not the English vernacular. So it's guys like Raymond Chandler, especially Raymond Chandler, I think, and Dashiell Hammett, who had a huge effect on me, with a second tier of British writers like Henry James Dickens and Shakespeare, who deeply informed my sense of what life is about.
All right. Dylan says, hi, Andrew. I just saw Gosnell this weekend. What's your opinion on birth control methods such as Plan B or the morning after pill?
A good question. As I understand it, and I'm not a doctor, and so I'm not, that there is a chance of those pills producing an abortion, but they don't necessarily produce an abortion. To me, how can I put this? I don't want to morally dice this thing up. It's like, if you've conceived a child, that's a life that's going to take place in time. It may not be a full life in that moment, but it's a life that's going to take place in time. Let it live. Let the person live. And that means that you should look at sex a little differently. doesn't necessarily mean that you should live a chaste life until you're married, but it means that you should understand that when you lie down with somebody and mix your body with theirs, you are doing the thing that was given us to do, to create life. That is what it's for. That is what it does, and you are taking that responsibility on board when you do it. And so I don't want to sit here and say, I don't know enough about these pills and how they work to say, well, this is right and this is wrong. What I think is you have to live in a way that you take your body seriously. Your body is all you got of you. Your body is speaking of a spiritual you, but it's still, it's still the language of yourself. And so when you treat that body like a piece of meat, you're going to get yourself in trouble. You're ultimately going to be miserable. That's one thing, but you're also going to get yourself in trouble. So I don't know. My feeling is that when you and I didn't live this way, and so I'm not preaching it hypocritically. I'm saying that this is what I think you should do. That when you lie down with somebody like that in that intimate way, you should be ready for the consequences and not be thinking like, oh my God, now I got to take this pill later, and is it right or is it wrong? You don't dice morality when you're talking about human life. You do the right thing.
All right. Sean wants to know, dear Mr. Klavan, I'm a massive self-saboteur. How do you truly surrender yourself to God's will without getting in your own way?
That's such a great question, such a deep, rich question. And I think there's no simple answer to it. One is that you want to understand, if you can, sometimes it takes therapy, you want to understand why you sabotage yourself, who it is you're trying to please when you sabotage yourself. But you do want to understand, no matter how much work you do on yourself, the human will is broken. The human will wants things that hurt it. The human will wants to do things that get in its own way. Every champion knows this. Every baseball player knows that there's something in his mind that wants him to miss the ball, and he is doing everything he can every day to hone that stuff away, to whittle it away. And ultimately, the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to surrender your will to the will of God. And one of the things about this is if you go to God and you talk to God on a regular basis, and you tell him that that's what you want to do, because you can will it without actually being able to do it, he will help you do that. He will give you insights into why you're sabotaging yourself. And if you understand that your will is broken and your will is diseased, which I think the human will is, it's not you, it's like everybody, God will help you with that. He actually will. And if you feel that you are self-sabotaging to the point where you're mentally ill, there are doctors who help with that. There are psychiatrists. I hope nowadays psychiatrists unfortunately drug too many people, but the psychotherapists, the psychologists don't do that. They will talk to you. And sometimes just by talking to someone, this work made a big difference in my life. Just by talking to someone, you can start to understand where the traps are. So you're not walking through a minefield anymore. You're walking through a trap, field of traps that you can see. Oh, this is the part where I often do this. Look, stuff still comes into my mind that I know is self-sabotaging. I think this is true for everybody. But now I know it. I know where it's coming from. And I say, oh no, I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to ask God for help with that. I'm going to follow his will for my life instead of my will. I don't know anybody who doesn't want something for his life that's not stupid, that we want things for our lives that are actually not the things we should want. And the hardest thing to learn and the smartest thing to learn is to learn to live the life God wants for you, not the life you want for you, because you don't know what you're talking about.
Back to Preacher Klavan, man.
Yeah, hallelujah.
Send your donations in, too.
Yeah, exactly, that's right. And if you want more, send us $5.
John says, hi, Andrew. Do you agree with Knowles that transgenderism is the thing that broke political correctness? If not, what do you think is responsible?
Well, I think transgenderism had a huge impact, partly because it's so irrational, but partly also because Obama always used political correctness and cultural issues to distract from the fact that all his policies were failing. So, like as he set the
right
Middle
side of
East,
history.
Yeah, he set the Middle East on fire. He sat on the economy that just wanted to rebound. People keep saying, well, the recovery started under him. Yeah, even he couldn't stop it. But if he could have, he would have. It was obviously wanted this big bounce to take place. Everything he did stank. Every single policy he did stank. So what he'd do is, look over there. A black man has been killed in the streets of St. Louis. And you go like, yeah, but he was a criminal. And the cop, no, he was black and the cop was white, so it must be a problem. And he would do it over and over again. When he said, we've got to deal with transgenderism, we've got to let boys who think they're girls into girls' rooms in schools, that was a moment when I thought, you know what, we may win the next election. Because up until that moment, I thought there was no chance we'd win the next election. The minute he said it, I thought we may win the next election. Not because I care about, I have any ill feelings against people who are confused about their sex, but because I thought, what does the Chicago Paul know about what should happen in a school in Arkansas or Alabama or Tennessee? Nothing. He knows nothing. He's a corrupt Chicago Paul dictating to people he knows nothing about and he doesn't like. So in that sense, I think it really did break the dazzling hold that this racial guilt and sexual guilt that the left has been selling for 50 years. It broke the hold of that, because it was, and because it was so irrational. Once you say to people, some women have penises, they're thinking like, they just
anyone
don't.
Anyone can have a baby.
Yeah,
that's what I've been saying lately. So, anybody can have a baby.
So I think the thing that is really sinister, but also hopeful, is political correctness is mental slavery. Mm-hmm. It is telling people what they are allowed to think in order to be virtuous. And all of us want to feel more virtuous than we are. And so I think the oppression of it, the fact that people are afraid to say what they think, the fact that James Damore can get fired from Google for saying men and women are different, the speaking the simple truth, you can get fired for that. I think that has frightened people, terrorized people. And I think that maybe Knowles is right to the extent that transgenderism is so crazy that people won't allow themselves to be oppressed by it. But ultimately, I just like to think that Americans fight back against this stuff. They deal with it for a while, but ultimately Americans want to say what they have to say. And I hope that remains true. I think political correctness is one of the most harmful developments of our time. I know I would much rather you told me you hated me for the color of my skin or whatever than that you kept it to yourself and just like let it seethe, come out and say it to my face. I'm not going to throw a punch at you. It's just say what you have to say. Let me know. And I just feel that about everybody. I would much rather hear what they have to say than have everybody walking around afraid. Anyway, I don't know if it's transgenderism specifically. What can you do when you're oppressing people mentally but go too far? And that may have been the moment when they went too far.
All right. Tony says, Klavan, do you think more states should be like Maine and my home state of Nebraska and split up the Electoral College? Why or why not?
No, I think that I like the Electoral College. I think that the
fascist.
Yeah, I know. I think that the closer your government is to you, the more power it should have over you. Essentially, that a state should be able to say, this is the way Maine lives. This is how Maine lives. The Senate. The president is supposed to be elected by the states. And I think the states are a good guide. You can move, you can leave your state, you can go to another state, you don't like the way your state votes, you can go someplace else, you can do all kinds of things. But I think splitting it up, it becomes a little bit too congressional. That's why we have Congress. You have little districts where you can vote your congressman who is your congressman. But I think the president should be elected by the states, and I think I think it's a really good system. I actually do. I think it's it's worked out pretty well.
All right. Arun wants to know, he's from a patriotic immigrant family. Do you think that unpatriotic but legal or lawful immigrants should be allowed to become citizens?
Well, that's interesting. You do have to take some kind of pledge, I think, to support the Constitution, to become a citizen, and I think you should have to take that pledge honestly. That's all you can say. And certainly, look, I do think that we should be allowed to say that if you can't say these things with any sense of honesty, and there's proof that you can't do it, that you don't get to be a citizen. Being a citizen, moving here and becoming a citizen, even if you do it legally, is still a privilege. And we have a right to keep out anybody we want. But I don't think you can strip people of that privilege like at random, basically.
Okay. So we only have a few more minutes.
Okay.
We're in the final countdown.
All
So
right.
if you're not a subscriber, you got to head on over and just keep asking those questions because we're running out of time. Sean says, if you could have any vehicle for your daily driver, what would it be?
A small plane, probably.
Get over LA traffic?
It's funny. I got to get a new car, and I haven't had any time to shop for one. So like every day I say to myself, you know what I should do? I should go, but I'm not going to do it. So I don't know yet. I do tend to like foreign cars, but they're so expensive. I loved my Beamer when I had one. I've really liked the Audi that I have now, but I also kind of like the new Cadillac. That's what I want to go.
All American.
I know the new Cadillacs are not like the old ones. The old ones were big and kind of garish, but the new ones are sleek. So I don't know. I want to check them out.
What was your first car?
A Volvo, I think, that my family gave me. Yeah.
That was my first car,
Yeah.
and my mom's Volvo wagon.
Yeah, the first car I bought for myself was, I believe, my Dodge Dart Jalopy that I picked my wife up in when she was hitchhiking. That's how I met her. And the Artful Dodge.
How did I not know this?
How do you know that? Because you haven't read my book. You should read The Great Good Thing. It tells all about it.
Sorry, somebody just got caught. Marcel says, hey, Andrew, what do you think about Trump's behavior towards U.S. allies such as the United Kingdom, Germany, or Canada? Shouldn't the administration aim to strengthen ties with those specific countries?
Well, look, Trump is a blustering, kind of big character who blunders around. Yeah, exactly. I think it's all time. He got elected. He's the president. I think it's all time we got used to him, you know. He does seem to really enjoy forming bonds with individuals, right? And I think that I don't really see, you know, I think that Europe is a little bit worried about the fact that he's erratic, that he doesn't, when he says something, he's always in a negotiation, so he's never saying exactly what he means. He's always saying something that he hopes will get him where he wants to go. And I think that has disturbed our allies. But he's certainly been a good ally to Israel. He's certainly he hasn't been unfriendly to our other allies, and he has brought some kind of sense of correction in. You know, what has been happening before Trump, what was happening, as far as I was concerned, is Europe was becoming infantilized by depending on us while complaining about us. It was like dealing with adolescents. It was like, oh, you know, you're so capitalist. You're capitalist. You know, yes. Could you please send us more of your armies to take care of us? And but you're a capitalist. You know, it's like it was ridiculous. It was childlike. You know, and all Trump has basically said to them is, hey, we're for America, you're for France, we can be friends, but you got to take care of yourself a little bit. I think that's the right thing to do.
All right.
I think they respect it too.
So show them a little bit of toughness?
Yeah. I mean, I think the system needs to be rearranged. It's a post-World War II system, and it's out of date, you know. And I've actually been kind of supportive of it. Look, I wish he had better manners. I really do. I wish our president had better manners.
We've talked about that.
Yeah.
You feel like it's important for a gentleman to be a gentleman.
Yes. And it's like, when you have a president who's calling the stripper he slept with horseface, you know you're not dealing with Mr. Manners. You know? Okay. And by the way,
but also,
I think he's done a great job as president.
Why?
Yeah.
I mean, he talks about #fake news only ever wanting to talk about strippers that he slept with.
Yeah.
But then he tweets about the stripper that he slept with.
What on earth goes through that guy's mind at times? I do not know, you know, but look, that's who we're dealing with. And he's doing a great job as president, which is disturbing. It's disturbing that a guy who calls the stripper he slept with horseface is also doing a good job as president. We're just going to have to deal with it, okay? Because because the left has gone so crazy, we have no alternatives. You know?
This is 2018, folks.
Yeah.
In case you're just waking up and joining us. We only have a few more minutes, so next question comes from Rachel. What is your favorite musical?
Oh my gosh.
We were also talking about this earlier.
Yes.
It's like these people could hear us before we went live on the conversation.
My favorite movie musical is probably Singing in the Rain. I mean, it is like, it's a perfect movie almost, you know.
Wonderful.
It really is wonderful. On the stage, I'm a Sondheim fan. I really like Stephen Sondheim, and I loved I've only given a standing ovation to two things in my life. One was Sweeney Todd, and the other was a non-musical called Arcadia. I hate giving standing ovations. I think it should be only for the very best thing. And I hate the fact that everything gets a standing ovation. But Sweeney Todd is a work of genius, and it's grim, and it's not a happy musical, but there's something about it that sticks with you forever. Pretty Women is one of the great songs ever written. I just love listening to what Sondheim does when he does it well. There are others, though. He wrote Gypsy, which I love. I think that's a great musical. I'm trying to think of like what I would just actually go and see again. That's because most musicals, I see them once, I enjoy them, and I'm done. But those, I think, are the ones that really stick out in my mind.
Interesting.
Any thoughts that I'm missing?
Oh, well, I just wanted to know your thoughts on Hamilton, because I already know Shapiro's.
I haven't seen Hamilton.
But have you listened to the music?
Not really.
Okay, so Ben has also not seen Hamilton.
Yeah.
But he says that 1776 is a much better
I will tell you
everything, and it is.
Yeah, I don't agree. I think he likes 1776 too much. I don't agree with him that it's that good. I think it's a really entertaining, patriotic musical, which I love, but I don't think it's a great musical. And I think I haven't seen Hamilton. The only thing I can say about Hamilton is I know one other guy who I met. He's a publisher who, when we met, we got in a conversation about musicals, and we both said we'd given only 2 standing ovations in our lives. and his was also Arcadia, and another Sondheim musical that was not Sweeney Todd. So we had very clear taste. He said that Hamilton was one of the best things he ever saw. So I've always wanted to see it, but I just haven't had a chance.
Okay, we need to send, like Daily Wire needs to send Andrew Klavan and Ben Shapiro to New York to see Hamilton.
Yeah, that would be great.
I mean, that would be amazing. And then we can televise a debate about it afterwards.
That would be fun.
Because I think that Ben's not going to change his opinion, and I think that you would be a fan.
Like I said, this guy and I had very similar tastes, and he just loved it.
Here we go. Veronica says, often women are told that they're shallow if they want an attractive husband, or gold diggers if they want a man with a job. I'd add, or money. Why is wanting someone decent seen as having too high standards?
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that, you want to feel attracted to your spouse. I think, I think that's really important. I remember when I realized what an amazing woman my wife had become over the years, remembering that really I married her because she had great legs, I was like, like, wow, I really lucked out, because that wasn't what I was thinking at the time. And so I think you want to be attractive. And I think a man with a job or with money, is somebody who has direction in his life, who has ambition in his life, who has some kind of sense of responsibility in his life. And I don't think that that's wrong at all. I think that if you want to have children, and you want to take care of your children, you want to be home and take care of your children, that is going to compromise your earning ability, and to have somebody who will support you in that very important and fulfilling work, I think is not wrong at all. And I don't think I think that obviously, just like there are people who only care about looks, who only care about money, you can go too far. But I don't think those are things that you should be ashamed of wanting.
All right. Trenton says that he has a family member who does all kinds of drugs, and he has never, quote unquote, hurt anyone, but it makes my family's life harder by the day. Should people really be libertarian on this issue?
Again, you're confusing what the government should be allowed to do with what people should do. It always bugs me when they were talking about football players disrespecting the flag, and I would hear ESPN, one announcer after another saying, well, they have a right to do it. They have a right to do it, and it's wrong to do. And I think that that's something we should talk about more. Just because something is wrong doesn't mean the government should have the power to restrict it. I think the government has the power to protect you from me, but it doesn't have the power to protect me from me. That is the essence of freedom, is to be able to do things, some of which may be self-destructive. I'm sorry this guy is doing that. I think drugs are just an absolute scourge. I literally think they steal the soul out of a man. But I don't think that just because something is wrong with the world, that the answer has to be the government.
All right. Jeffrey wants to know, hey, Andrew, I am 18 and kind of a more reserved person. There is a girl that I like at my church, but I'm scared to ask her out. What should I do?
Ask her out. That's an easy question. Saying that you're afraid is fine. We're all afraid of something. But acting on your fear is not so fine. And obviously, this is something, you should definitely ask her out. You got to do it. This is the essence of what courage is. Courage, as I believe John Wayne said, is not having fear. It's having the fear and doing the thing you got to do. We all have certain fears. I'm a painfully shy human being. This is true, but you overcome it, and especially in this case where you want to meet a girl who could be somebody really important to you. You just got to do the thing. There's no answer.
Do it.
Yeah,
do it.
Exactly.
And also, I'm from the female perspective, either you do it and she says yes, great. If she says no, you learned, you still overcame a fear.
That's right.
And then the next time, I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal.
Well, it's funny. This kind of fear is irrational. Knowing how shy I have been in my life, it's not really like you think, oh, I'm afraid of this or I'm afraid of that. You just have a hard time doing it. But you are absolutely right that the more you do it, the more you can do it. And one of the things that cured, like I used to be afraid of making phone calls, but I became a reporter and I had to make phone calls. And after a while, it gets easy, you just keep doing it. So you're absolutely right. If you do it, even if you get rejected, you will have gained something from it.
All right. Michael says, hi, Andrew. I graduated with a degree in a technical field almost 2 years ago, but I haven't found a job yet in that field. Do you think my right-leaning comments on Facebook have any bearing on that?
I don't know, but they could. I think that's certainly true. And I think, this is a very, what I've started to do in Hollywood, because I know that I've been blacklisted or at least graylisted in Hollywood, is I start to bring it up in meetings. I say, look, I do have a different way of looking at things. This is why I say what I say. This is, and I try to explain it. I can't tell in your field, how would I know in your field whether that's having an effect? But it certainly can, and I think you should I don't think you should be careful about what you say. I do think you should be careful about the way you say it. I think that is just perfectly rational, good manners. You don't want to confuse courage with rudeness. I think those are two different things, and you can say the things that you have to say without being necessarily snarky or mean or anything like that.
All right, Mariah wants to know, she wants to make sure that her teaching methods incorporate how boys learn, as boys are falling behind in education. She seems like a decent teacher.
Yeah, a decent human being, too.
Good for you.
Yeah.
What do you think are the best ways to interest boys in a learning environment?
Well, two things that come to mind immediately. I'm not a teacher, but two things come to mind. Is boys do need to get outside. I mean, they really do. They put boys in these chairs, and then they say, "Oh, well, he's got learning ADD, and we've got to drug him."
Dyslexia.
I think every father should say the same thing when they say they're going to drug you for ADHD. Say, "Over my dead body." That's the thing. So boys need to get out. You got to respect that. You got to respect the fact that they need to roughhouse, they need to play games, they need to compete. That's one thing. The other thing is boys learn from objects more than relationships, and they deal with objects better than they deal with relationships. So I remember the best teacher I ever had was my fourth grade teacher. She was one of those teachers they talk about, that they don't exist all that much. No, but one of the things she would do is she would say, "Go build a planet." And you go like, okay, and you go build a planet, and you'd learn about map making, and you learn about and then when you wanted to talk about geography, you cared about geography because you realized, oh, it's a planet, I get it, So I think that guys, they relate to each other through objects, like through sports and through play. You always talk about fathers playing catch with their sons. Why do you talk about that? Why don't you talk about mothers playing catch with their daughters? Because mothers and daughters can talk directly. Women get along and are very comfortable in relationships. Men are comfortable with things. So a father and son playing catch are actually having a relationship. So if you teach kids, boys, especially through objects, you can reach them a lot easier. That's what I think. I mean, I think that that's why science and technology are things that boys naturally gravitate toward.
I just had an epiphany. That's why you guys like Backstage so much.
Because
you have the objects of the whiskey and the cigars with your conversation.
We come for the whiskey and cigars. We talk because they pay us.
And that is tomorrow night. And that was our last question. Thank you, Mariah, for that final question. And thanks, everyone, for joining Andrea and I on this month's episode of The Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to dailywire.com now and join us for next month's episode with the wonderful Michael Knowles. That's going to be on Tuesday, November 13th at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 2:30 p.m. Pacific. And I hope that we will see you guys tomorrow night on Backstage.